So you start the business. You've doing a side hustle. When did you go main hustle?
So the inflection point was so first I probably just need to call out that when I first started the side hustle, when it got serious, um, I had gotten a few contracts where after getting the book deals and doing that kind of stuff, I found myself working for really large companies managing offshore teams in India.
Yeah.
Um, and I absolutely hated it. It was just driving me nuts. I'd have like 2 hours and they weren't hiring like the top quality teams or anything like that. And I don't even know if at that time the dev culture there was, I mean, the dev culture in India is really awesome now. And those devs are, you know, getting the big bucks and all that, just like anywhere else. But at the time, I don't know if we were just the company I was subcontracting through was sourcing the wrong candidates or whatever. But it was a really frustrating model to try and get work right. And I'd have 36 developers and 2 hours a day to talk to them, and the skill sets weren't there. And it's just super frustrating. I'm sure most folks could relate if you've had kind of a frustrating offshore experience. You get someone on the phone or something and you can't really communicate well. And then that kind of repeated a few times until I worked with my partner Prashant at this company where we were doing predictive analysis software for the medical industry, and so it would like try and predict the likelihood that folks would come back into the ER to help the nurses kind of figure out who they should focus on. And when I worked with Prashant, it was completely different. He was awesome to work with. He was super curious. And him and I had really successful outcomes at that company. And we both saw the value in it. And we both realized how hard it was to create the team of the kind that we created, because you had to have a guy like me in the US and a guy like him there. Those two folks had to have the right chemistry.
Yep.
So you have to have boots on the ground, the right relationships, expensive resources. And we're like, this is why none of the small companies are doing it. All the big companies are doing it. And so Prashant told me one morning, he's like, man, screw this, man. He's like, let's take this on the road and go sell it to some people. He's like, you're entrepreneurial, I'm entrepreneurial. And so I told him like, yeah, sure. Why don't you try and get it going? I'll try and get it going. Let's try and collaborate. And if we get enough collaborations, then we'll have something. And so that's when I went and I got my DBA. And I just started the fake it till you make it of telling people, yeah, I've got this company and, I've got this team. And so we did that to answer your question about when did where was the inflection point where it changed? The inflection point was I always had a main contract that didn't involve the offshore team. And so I was always working some contract and I'd negotiate those contracts to where it would be like part-time 35-hour a week contract.
Yep.
And I had to pitch the way I did that and all that. I just kind of tell them, like, I bill my time honestly. And, if I'm billing 40 hours a week, I'm really working 50. I was like, so I don't want to tell you I'm going to bill 40 because really I'd be overcharging you. I'm really going to be billing like 35. And so that allowed me to kind of get, okay, that you're a part-time employee. And then like, if I ran into anything, I say, look, I told him I was part-time. And so I did that for a while. And then finally we got enough business where I could essentially quit my main hustle contract and just focus just on the project stuff. And that kind of happened with this really stressful timing where there was this big contract that was out there, which is one of our biggest customers now. And then this cash cow contract that I had worked on and done like 2 tours of duty for that was really providing us a nice lifestyle. So I had talked to the bigger guys and I didn't have as much experience with contracts at that time. And I thought the deal was signed, sealed, and delivered, which it wasn't. And so I quit my cash cow contract. And then I got some static back from the big contract um, that, I was like, oh my God, is this not going to go through? And then I almost had a heart attack that day because from stress. And then the next day, it all ended up working out and we got the contract. But it was definitely one of the most stressful days in my life. And that was probably my truest entrepreneur kind of risk it kind of moment. But then that contract came through and that gave us enough kind of, that's probably when we switched from survival to sustainable, which was about 3 years in or 4 years. I thought it was going to be 2 years, but it was more like 3 or 4 years in before we got sustainable. And then we got on a growth path. And the thing that really allowed us to be successful was from this podcast I listened to with Dustin, where he was talking about making sure the clients were happy. I decided to quantify that into some core values. And so we have much different values than most companies. Now probably need to update that, but we just have two simple values. And like one is that customers are comfortable with their invoices.
Yep.
And then the other is that we don't give anything away for free. And so what ends up happening, the outcome of that is that if we're doing a project for you and you come and you say, man, why did this take so long? And they had to rewrite that and it, all that. What's the conversation going to be? It's going to be like, hey, what do you think it's worth? Let's make this right. So you end up dropping some stuff off the bill. So I just gave something away for nothing. Well, the way we avoid breaking that principle is that every mistake is a new process. And so by having those two principles in place, or those two values, it's forced us to kind of take the burden of all the mistakes we make on a financial level as a company. And it's forced me and Prashant as partners to work 3-4 months long projects with no profits, working on our vacations and all this kind of stuff. But it's really forced us to kind of, experience pain from our mistakes and then improve our processes. And so we get pretty frequent compliments now in our sales cycle that when folks see how we approach things, that our processes for the size of company we are extremely mature and but not too heavy and that kind of thing. Just real practical stuff.